Hello, welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. Is this called Maunday Thursday or is that a different day? It's the day before Good Friday. And the heath is actually relatively quiet, so I'm sitting on a bench for a change rather than my usual favourite tree. Mild spring day, pleasant little blossom out on the way and all that, but none of that relevant, of course, to today's wine. This is from Everflyht. Once again, I have featured, I think, 2 wines from them before. While I wasn't really closely paying attention, they went and released another 2, and they arrived today, earlier on. Long wait, but won't complain. This is their Blanc de Noirs. It is a 2020 vintage. Previously, I tried a rosé from them and a regular sort of white brut, whatever you call it. And there's also another, is it a reserve wine to come. So I thought I'd open this up first, save the best till first. Blanc de Noir is usually the style that I seem to get most excited about. Doesn't always deliver exactly what I hope it will. I hope it's going to be awash with stone fruits and hedgerow fruits and stuff like that. And sometimes they can be quite different. Sometimes they can be surprisingly Chardonnay-esque in style. But let's go and open this up and see what it is like. Nice to be sitting in the sun. I was here yesterday. I had my dinner on the heath yesterday, but didn't actually take any video for a change. So it was actually getting a bit cold yesterday, I think. Today a little bit warmer this time of day. This has had 3 and a bit hours in my fridge, and since then it's just been in that freezer jacket thing, ice jacket, whatever you call that thing. So I hope it's a reasonable temperature. We'll see. I was reading the Wine Anorak website. Is that Jamie Good, is he called? A wine expert who talks about English sparkling quite a lot. And he said it's 80% Pinot Noir, 20% Pinot Meunier. What else do I remember about it? The dosage is right down at the bottom level of brut at 6 grams a litre. So it's going to be relatively dry, I hope. It's entirely malolactic fermented. So that means all of the really harsh malic acids, the sort of appley, green apple, really zingy acids have been converted into lactic acids. It should give something that's sort of a bit softer and creamier and possibly even apparently more fruit expression and a bit less sort of jarring zing. Getting sort of patisserie vibes from this. Something like a cherry tart and something like a lemon tart, and it's as though I'm sharing these at a tea party and I have a little slice on my plate of cherry tart and a little slice of lemon tart. And there is a sort of subtle pastry-ish backdrop there. There's definitely more to it than just the lemon. There's clearly something citrus there, but there's also some kind of red, possibly more like stone fruit. I'm inclined to say cherry. I think possibly Jamie Good came to the same conclusion there, cherry. That's pretty nice. Nice, pleasant start there. It has a kind of, even on the nose, a sort of sherbety quality. It has sort of tingly kind of, does sherbet have a smell? I feel as though sherbet does have a smell. I know that sounds weird. It's basically just, what is it, citric acid and sugar and maybe corn flour or something like that to give it that soft texture. Interesting. Yeah, that's nice. It's quite precise, quite clean, quite elegant. Like I say, patisserie, sort of pastry-ish, a little bit pastry. The pastry subtle, cherries and lemons. The very first moment that hits my tongue, I get a sort of creamy note. I think this is again going along with that pastry-ish, lemon tart, cherry tart sort of theme. And then again, I'm thinking about sherbet. I get a sort of sherbety tingle, and then I feel the fizz. The sort of dry sherbet translates more into sparkling wine, something actually liquid. And then the zing. There is definitely some acidity, nice amount of acidity here, but that seems to come a bit later on, interestingly. Try that again, see if that's repeatable. Creaminess. Now I'm noticing a bit of minerality. That zingy transition from dry sherbet to English sparkling wine. And there's more lemon there. I think it's more citrus on the palate. I do think I can detect some other fruit on the nose, but that's probably where the cherry is currently residing mostly, and when you get to the palate it's more citrusy, sherbety twang, but also those creamy notes which are nice, and something mineral, ever so slightly saline. The citrus character might be a tiny bit like those preserved lemons in a jar there. I think they sometimes have a tiny bit of salt to help with the preservation. It's pretty nice. I would say the Pinot character for me is more noticeable on the nose. That's where I think the cherries are coming from. After that, and this is quite common with Blanc de Noir, they're 100%, this is 100% Pinot, it's 80% Pinot Noir, 20% Pinot Meunier, but I don't really get a huge amount of sense of fruit characters that I would normally associate with Pinot grapes, apart from that first nose of cherry. From then on, it does feel a little bit more Chardonnay-esque, but that often seems to be the case with Blanc de Noir. I suppose it is quite dry. Am I noticing that very low dosage? 6 is right on the border between brut and extra brut. I'm definitely not doubting that is the case, but there are little tiny flecks of sweetness in there, as I say, sort of a sherbety sensation, which tends to be, sugar plus acid, citric acid. You know what I'm thinking of? Sherbet dib dabs. Because there was a lolly with, I don't know what the flavour was supposed to be, but it was red, wasn't it? A boiled sweet type lolly. And you stuck that into the sherbet, and that would have had a, obviously synthetic flavour, but something that would have been somewhat simulating strawberry and or cherry if it was red. Those are your typical options, aren't they, for sweet flavours? Synthetic cherry and or, I'm not saying this tastes like synthetic cherry, but there is a sensation that's slightly reminiscent. That combination of cherry and zingy lemon in a slightly sherbety way does remind me a bit of sherbet dib dabs. I like that. It is very dry, quite different from the Rosé de Saignée. There's quite a lot of range in Everflyht, I'm finding. This is a much more delicate, subtle, but still interesting wine. The Rosé de Saignée was quite a gutsy wine, I thought. Oh, one more thing I gleaned from the Wine Anorak site is that the wine is made at Hambledon. I had wondered whether they had a winery of any description on site. They don't. It's a small site, something like 10 hectares or something, which is bigger than Breaky Bottom. Breaky Bottom has a winery for at least the first stage of the winemaking process on site. But here at Everflyht, I think all the grapes are shipped off to Hambledon. Enjoying that. I might possibly come back to you if I have any further thoughts on a subsequent glass, but if not, that's been pretty nice. I think I prefer this to the regular white brut, which was okay, but I don't remember that being quite so interesting as this. Personally, I think that's pretty good. Again, not exactly what I was expecting from a Blanc de Noir, but then they often do different things, and it's fine by me. It's nice in its own way. I would like to add a bit of an addendum to this for a subsequent glass. I'm noticing a sweet patisserie note on the nose now that wasn't really there quite so much before. It was sort of pastry-ish, but not necessarily quite so sweet. And this is a very familiar smell. I feel like I sometimes get this in night timber, honeyed almost, honeyed or sort of sugary encrusted pastry, which is interesting because the palate really isn't particularly sweet. It's quite dry, it's quite low on the dosage, but sophisticated sort of millefeuille kind of, you know what I mean? That kind of pastry that has a bit of a sugary crust to it. But just in the smell, the palate is still really quite dry and sophisticated. Not that sugary pastry is not sort of sophisticated, but you know what I mean. Noticing a bit less of the fruit now, though, which is interesting. The first glass, I was definitely getting notes of stone fruit, lemon, cherries and lemons. Now I think this is autolytic character. I think this is a really lovely, sweet patisserie sort of note, really coming to the fore now. Again, not something I would necessarily associate with a Blanc de Noir, but it's very welcome wherever it's come from. And it is, again, actually, now I think about it, reminiscent of a particularly nice, well-expressed bottle of night timber on the palate. I think they're quite big on malolactic fermentation at night timber as well. I think that's one of their signature things. Perhaps some of these notes are just trademarks or hallmarks of malolactic. That is a really smart, sophisticated glass of wine. Very much now in the patisserie department, but you know, really fine, high-end French patisserie. Lovely. The sun is starting to think about setting over there as well, so I'm having a very pleasant time. If I don't do any more, then cheers. Gone mad, Tweedy, you're taking zoomed in pictures of clouds. It's gonna look awful. Why are you doing this?